The war between Ukraine and Russia is now entirely based on speed and stock superiority. Putin has tried to maintain his advantage by buying time until now, but the European engine has restarted. Russia responded to Europe and Trump's peace proposal with one of the heaviest attacks on Kiev. This bloody rejection created a moment of rupture in the Paris-Berlin line. France and Germany are taking critical steps in sync for the first time. 3 critical moves were announced in a single day. This is not only about giving Ukraine a military and economic breather, but also sending a message to the Kremlin that patience has run out. Now Macron is stepping on the speed pedal, not the brake. Merz is not closing the file. He is expanding it. Macron outlined the political framework for this tone on August 29. If Putin refuses to meet face-to-face with Zelensky, Trump will be played for a fool, he warned. This accelerated the decision-making process from Washington to Berlin. This sentence legitimized 3 things in Europe at the same time. Ukraine's skies will thicken, the ammunition metronome will speed up, and secondary sanctions will be imposed on the third country networks that keep Russia afloat. The rhetoric was over. The tempo had begun. Now air defense is expanding. German drone factories in Kiev are scaling up, and secondary sanctions are locking down gray trade channels. And yes, not only the system, but also ammunition is flowing. The German line is now set to deliver tens of thousands of rounds this year and hundreds of thousands next year. Furthermore, Friedrich Merz has clearly stated that there are no longer any range restrictions. Macron's warning about being played linked 2 different issues in the same sentence, both internally and externally. Domestically, there is a reminder of the fluctuating rhythm of U.S. politics. Photos of setting the table should not slow down the rhythm on the ground. Abroad, the signal sent to the Kremlin is clear. Any maneuver aimed at dividing the alliance and buying time will produce momentum in the opposite direction. This is precisely where Putin's problem begins, because the cheap, pressure-expensive defense equation that has been in place for 2 years is being reversed. Air defense is not just a battery, it is a system. The battery has sensors, software, backups, and a maintenance schedule. Europe is setting up this system not for one night, but for months. Upper-tier systems like SAMP-T, mid-tier systems like IRIS-T SLM-SLS, and upper-mid-tier systems like Patriot create a mobile network rather than a fixed dome over Ukrainian cities. This network operates with radar, electro-optical, passive sensors, and electronic attack capabilities. 60 targets one night, 120 the next. What matters is not just the interception rate, but the interception rhythm. As that network breathes, each salvo becomes a more costly gamble for Moscow. It's not just about one more Mamba battery or one more IRIS-T line. The real issue is density in the sky. Every battery, every launch tube, every radar array reverses Russia's plan to wear down expensive defenses with cheap platforms. Because if the rhythm isn't disrupted, civilian morale recovers, the power grid suffers less damage, and the rear echelons breathe easier. It is no coincidence that Paris and Berlin have brought this issue to the forefront of the political discourse. In Russian salvos, every target that is not hit erodes the Kremlin's propaganda value. As the impact increases, the number increases. And as the number increases, the cost inflates. As the cost inflates, supply becomes fragile. This is precisely when secondary sanctions come into play, because missiles, drones, tanks, and artillery are not products. They are supply chains. If the bank financing the microchips, optics, bearings, machinery, sensors, and software fails to make the transfer, the factory stops. Intermediary banks, the postal companies making the transfers, the reinsurance chain writing the insurance, and the re-export lines. The latest packages from the EU and G7 introduce a meticulous screening of shadow fleets and payments routed through third countries. If a tanker cannot find shadow fleet insurance, the cargo does not leave. If a postal company is barred from gray transit documents, the part's journey lengthens, and the risk premium increases. This screening makes every new part risky and expensive. Production becoming more expensive challenges the Kremlin's long war vision. When Kremlin spokesman Peskov said, "Secondary sanctions are illegal and unacceptable," he was actually describing the problem on the ground. What is unacceptable is the rising cost. What is unacceptable is the delay in the plan. What is unacceptable is the gradual exposure of the gray networks. What Paris and Berlin are saying here is simple. the capillaries feeding the Russian war industry will be tracked and blocked. This affects not only the Kremlin's salvo, but also the factory's work. What you call a long war is actually a long supply chain. If the supply chain is disrupted, the length disappears. Two developments are particularly decisive on the German side. The second line that sets the pace on the field is the rhythm of the bullets. Germany's production line is not an exercise, it is a delivery date. This year, tens of thousands of 155mm shells. Next year, at least 100,000, with the option to increase. The first is in the industrial sector. iCloud's new line in Germany has come online, announcing a schedule to produce 25,155mm artillery shells this year and at least 100,000 shells for Ukraine starting in 2026. It was stated that as this line matures, it could climb to a capacity of 150,000 and above, and that the goal is to establish a metronome of uninterrupted ammunition for Ukraine. This is an insurance policy to ensure that the fire does not stop. Artillery fire keeps not only the enemy, but also the nervous system of one's own soldiers on their toes. When the bullets run out, the position falls silent. And when the position falls silent, the night grows longer. On a front where the rhythm flows steadily, the Russian army's opportunities for short windows, intense strikes diminish. That narrowing disrupts Moscow's press today, wait tomorrow tempo. Euromaidan press. Second, the political threshold. Chancellor Friedrich Merz's line in Berlin that there should be no limit on the range of weapons given to Ukraine is important not only in terms of German domestic politics, but also in terms of the Kremlin's assumption of a safe rear area. Moscow reacted harshly to this. However, this debate shows that Europe is now speaking loudly about the issue of range. When range is discussed, Moscow's ledger is reopened. The risk to points considered safe, such as factories, warehouses, bridges, and radars, increases. This makes Russia's attack plans more expensive. There is a third headline showing that the France-Germany axis is working not only for today, but also for tomorrow. It is reported that while restarting defense cooperation, the two countries also opened the topics of nuclear context and early warning retaliation architecture, and even put a joint missile warning network, JEWEL, project on the table. This is a move that increases continental resilience and creates a safety valve against the ups and downs of U.S. politics. Europe, seeing its own sky, means sky protection for Ukraine tomorrow. Launches from the north, platforms on the Black Sea line, risks on the Caspian Donbas line. The stronger the early warning, the shorter the air defense response time. As the response time shortens, the success rate per salvo increases. Now let's bring these three lines, air defense, secondary sanctions, ammunition production, together and concretize what has changed in the equation facing the Kremlin. Russia's strategy to date has been to overwhelm Ukraine's air defense with high-volume and complex salvos, causing psychological and infrastructural damage during moments of vulnerability. This puts pressure on city alarms and the power grid, while also obscuring the air picture at the front. However, increasing the mass of the defense, expanding the radar optical electronic warfare layers, and being able to respond with the same intensity every night reverses this equation. Paris and Berlin's promise of more air defense precisely describes this shift in era. Secondary sanctions, though seemingly technical, directly affect the pulse of war. This is because sanctions, along with the economy, make everything used in war, down to the smallest military component, such as a screw or a bearing, inaccessible or prohibitively expensive. Meanwhile, Germany's artillery shell production line fuels the daily rhythm on the front lines. 25,000 shells this year, at least 100,000 shells next year. Moreover, production could potentially scale up to a capacity band of 150,000 or more. Ukraine's biggest problem on the ground was the occasional drop in shell tempo. Now it is more feasible to maintain the no ceasefire line. Macron's stern message also contains a line addressed to Washington, saying if Putin is avoiding the meeting, Trump is being played is also a call to the White House and Congress not to reward the side playing for time. This call shows that while Europe continues its strategy of staying inside without escalating outside, it demands speed on the transatlantic front. This is not just polemic. It is the version of deterrence rhetoric turned toward the U.S. domestic audience, because as the U.S. side increases the pace in air defense, radar, electronic warfare, and ammunition support, It becomes easier for Europe to carry the additional weight. If the pace is matched on both sides, the Kremlin's divide and weight game will not work. The pieces are no longer fixed on the Ukrainian side. The combined use of long-range UAVs and missiles is being tested for same-night strikes from sea to land and from air to depth. Drone programs exceeding 1,000 kilometers are impacting logistics, while missile files with 3,000-kilometer class claims are impacting energy and the defense industry. The goal is the same on both fronts: to dry up the revenue stream and gain the tempo advantage. These munitions alone do not win wars, but they make the opponent's plan a little more obsolete every night. Europe's two-pronged attack of air defense and sanctions therefore finds its counterpart on the ground. The bad news for Putin is that Europe's message is not confined to a single newspaper. Macron issued the warning, and the next day Paris and Berlin spoke the same language. More air defense is not a one-off. It is a package deal that includes spare parts, operators, and software updates. The same goes for secondary sanctions. It is a network that includes intermediary banks, insurance, transit documents, and re-exporters. If these networks feed off each other, the Kremlin's nighttime plan will run aground. When it does, the peace table photo will also change. Because now the speed will be in defense, not attack. From here on, it's a matter of tempo. Europe understood this belatedly, but now it is starting to make the right moves. If air defense operates at a steady pace, cities can breathe. If ammunition flows at a steady pace, the front holds. If sanctions are applied at a steady pace, factories falter. When all three happen simultaneously, what the Kremlin calls its bargaining power is really just buying time. Until now, Europe and Washington have been trying to maintain the situation with sanctions spread over 3 years and limited ammunition supplies. However, it was impossible to sustain this situation without a strong defense, deterrent weapons, and most importantly, a steady flow of ammunition. Now, if time cannot be bought, mistakes increase. When mistakes increase, panic sets in. And yes, today, Putin is in panic mode, because his options on the table are dwindling. On one side, Kiev's deepening UAV and missile programs. On the other, Europe's thickening shield and narrowing gray networks. The Kremlin's response to this new phase will, of course, come. 3 headlines stand out here. A more scattered salvo tactic, seeking compensation by closing production internally, accelerating the flow of payments and parts with gray networks. Russia will try pressure from different vectors on the sea-air-land line, trying to create room for negotiation. However, with each new attempt, the triangle of salvos are expensive, supply is risky, range is debatable, will remain on the table. Merz's words strengthen one corner of this triangle. The missile line feeds the second corner. Macron's words and France-Germany coordination, meanwhile, thicken the third corner, air defense. When all 3 corners are in place, the circle closes. Closing one side is not enough. It must be squeezed from 2 sides. If all 3 happen simultaneously, Russia will achieve less on the battlefield, while paying a higher price in the treasury. This is not just about the battlefield, it's about internal political balance. So, how does all this narrow Putin's room for maneuver? The cost difference between attack and defense increases. It becomes harder to find parts and payments in the production supply cycle. In European domestic politics, the language of "let's speed things up" replaces "let's wait and see." Macron's stance is the most visible manifestation of this language. Merz's line defines the technical threshold. However, the most critical element here is the discipline of implementation. Sanctions are effective when implemented as announced. Air defense works when it is deployed, maintained, and backed up. The ammunition line establishes rhythm when deliveries are made on time, as announced. Paris and Berlin announcing these 3 points on the same day and in the same sentence is a political commitment to implementation discipline. In short, Europe is not leaving things to chance this time. Air defense is increasing. The ammunition schedule is becoming clearer. Secondary sanctions are next. Macron said, "Let's not fall for it." Merz said, "There is no range lock." Peskov said, "It's illegal." But war is won through engineering. Engineering requires rhythm. Today, Europe is setting the rhythm. If this rhythm is maintained, Ukraine can establish pressure with its defensive advantage and corner Moscow. Thank you for choosing us.